Sport Clips Haircuts Holiday Halftime Giveaway has cash for you this holiday season. Sport Clips is giving away $500 every day until December 15th. Visit sportclips.com/holiday to enter for your chance to win. No purchase necessary. Ends 12/15. Must be 18 or older to enter. Subject to official rules at sportclips.com/holiday. Void where prohibited.
And good Friday morning, everybody. Welcome in to another edition of Golic and Wingo. We are glad you have survived the work week. And we've made it to Friday, or as we like to call it around these parts, Fry-yay, as we are here. Glad you're with us. Trey Wingo, Mike Golic Jr. We are on ESPN Radio and ESPN2, as always, presented by Progressive Insurance. And all the phone guests joining us today will join us via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Got some great things coming up today. 7 o'clock hour on the East Coast. Field Yates will join us to talk about everything going on in the NFL. We've got Peter King. At 8:05, he'll join us to talk about what's going on with the Cleveland Browns and how maybe they found the right guy, but did they do it in the right manner? Scott Frost, the new head coach in Nebraska, will join us to talk about, speaking of doing things in the right manner, how you make the transition from one coaching job to the other. And Jalen Rose will join us 9:30 Eastern in studio to talk about all things NBA, including what's going on with the Cavs and also what's going on with the trade of Jahlil Okafor to the Brooklyn Nets from the 76ers. Pretty interesting game last night.
Yeah, it was. For Thursday nighter, which we'll get into, the old Thursday night game and reasons we lost or reasons we won. But, it was a good game. And Matt Ryan, Mike, I heard you were on the way in. Just it's befuddling with his 3 interceptions, yet they're still able to get a win somehow. So two wins this season. Yeah, 2 wins this season, 2-0.
And the rest of the league is
0-23.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
It's just amazing. 2 of the picks were his fault, 1 not, going through Hooper's hands, the tight end. But you saw a big difference with some of the injuries. The Saints lost we'll get into this. Saints lost a lot of players, including Alvin Kamara, and the rushing game went down the tubes. A rushing attack that's second in the league. Atlanta's is 6th, and New Orleans at 2nd. Both of those teams relying on, a two-headed monster in the backfield. But between that and then I know we watch a lot of the college award shows as well. Certainly some good basketball going on last night with the buzzer beater for the Lakers and the 76ers. But Good things going on, but boy, Atlanta certainly helped themselves, putting themselves in a real nice position after last night.
Yeah, helped their chances. I think our FPI has them up over 50%. I think 52% now for their playoff odds going forward as they're neck and neck with Carolina. New Orleans still leading the division there, still a chance going forward to clinch, but going to have to wait a little while longer now as I think they're 3-1 in the division with another game against Atlanta left and then finishing up the season at Tampa Bay.
Well, look, they're behind both Carolina and Atlanta and New Orleans right now in the standings, but if they win out, they're going to win the division because they're all division games. So we'll get into that much later, but let's begin this Friday morning with what we always begin the show with.
It's time for Off the Top.
Whether you like it or not, it's just beginning.
With Golic and Wingo.
All right, and we start off the top with perhaps the shortest GM search in the history of the NFL.
Wow.
Give it to Cleveland because they once had a coach that didn't make it 365 calendar days. So I understand sometimes they expedite things. But Thursday morning, they fired Sashi Brown, who was their de facto GM, the executive vice president of football operations, however you want to call it.
Right.
And by last night, they had filled the job. They've named former Chiefs GM John Dorsey as the new GM of the Browns. He'll be introduced at a news conference today.
I mean, we all know the numbers that are horrible associated with the Browns since 99. 9 head coaches tied for 4th most, 28 starting quarterbacks. That's the most. They have a ton of draft picks for next year, including the conditional draft picks. So what are they going to do with them? To me, the most important thing is what's going to be their thought process yet again going forward. They switched to the baseball model. Is that now over? Is Dorsey going to clean house, in management and go back to what a lot football, way of going about the business where DiPodesto comes in from the Mets to do kind of the Moneyball thing? Is that done now? Are we done with that thought process and now are we shifting back to the old time process?
Well, now it doesn't matter.
No,
like you've gotten through the part of this that involved moving things around, collecting assets in the draft. Now you get to reap the benefits, and they're going to bring a guy in who's more of, I saw Field Yates tweet and said John Dorsey is a scout, and he's more of a traditional football scout in all the ways. And so he's going to go and make picks and use all of this great cap space, the draft picks, and the acquisitions from last offseason. And this is going to be a much better looking team, but it's not going to be because in large part of what John Dorsey's done. I think this is the system Sashi Brown left behind.
Well, look,
I'm annoyed.
Look, there's 2 ways. That's actually 3 ways to look at this. First of all, the cupboard is not bare. I mean, they have an extra first rounder, 2 extra second rounders, and a bunch of picks and tons of cap space. Okay, so that's the good news. And a guy like Dorsey, his track record is really good. Okay, I mean, you could make the case that they got the right guy, but they might not have done it the right way. You know, I know the Fritz Pollard Alliance has always said, wait a minute, has already raised some questions. How does this satisfy the Rooney Rule that they have a guy that they fire in the morning and they've already hired the guy by Thursday night? And we'll get into that with Peter King and maybe with Field Yates a little, because there is a process that needs to be gone through here. But the Moneyball aspect, Paul DePodesta is still there for now. The question then becomes, when Dorsey comes in, is he going to be able to say, you, get out?
Right.
Because we've had the picks before with Cleveland. They just haven't picked the right players. You know, it's one thing to have the picks. You got to execute them the right way.
And that's the one thing with Cleveland, is you can't point to one regime, because there's been multiple regimes that have stunk in either A, picking talent, or B, developing talent. So there's plenty of blame to go around. So you just say, okay, new guy, throw it up against the wall, see what sticks.
I'm so sick of this idea that this is about them missing on quarterbacks and people pointing at Carson Wentz and Deshaun Watson and all these guys. You know what Cleveland's done a lot of in this time? Picked a lot of quarterbacks. And you know what they can't do? They can't point to one thing as the reason why. Maybe you're bad at developing, maybe you're bad at picking, but you've shown we can't rely on both. So for you to say, if we had Carson Wentz or Deshaun Watson, this would have been different, I have zero reason to believe it would have been different. This is on the whole system, and now you've bucked that system just because you look and see grass is greener on the other side at organizations that just happen to run themselves a little better.
I hear you, but later on in this show, we'll go through the list of quarterbacks they chose as the ones they could have had.
Yeah,
it is astounding.
It's staggering. Yeah,
it is the 1927 Yankees of bad quarterback drafting. By that, I mean it's the best bad drafting of quarterbacks you'll ever see in your life.
I'm just saying, you know what? Carson Wentz or one of those guys could have easily been in that graveyard, because what do we always joke? The Browns are an organization that just suck people in and drag them down to their level. I'm not convinced that any amount of talent could overcome the ineptitude at an organizational level that they've displayed.
That may be true. However, there is one constant theme that's been there over the last 8 or 9 years, and that's the ownership of Jimmy Haslam.
Yeah.
And you look at what else does Jimmy get involved with? Pilot J, which has had its all kinds of legal issues, and is he involved in Tennessee as well?
Oh, yeah.
And how's that
That's
working?
Right. Yeah, it worked out too well.
I mean, there's a bunch of issues there. We'll get into that a little later, but we will go through that list of quarterbacks. It is absolutely amazing. We continue.
Off the top.
Well, it is going to be a shocker if Baker Mayfield doesn't win the Heisman on Saturday, because he cleaned up at the College Football Awards show Thursday. The front runner for the Heisman won the Maxwell Award for Player of the Year, Camp Award for Player of the Year, and the O'Brien Award, Davey O'Brien Award for Best Quarterback of the Year.
Yeah, he did pretty well. He cleaned up, and I know, Trey, you have a really good poll question you're going to throw out there. We'll get to. All expectations is not only will he win the Heisman, but the highest percentage of winner of a Heisman was Troy Smith at 91.3% or 6%, something like that. Will Baker Mayfield go over that? But congrats to the others. You know, Minkah Fitzpatrick, who won the Thorpe Award for the best DB, Bednarik Award, one of the Defensive Player of the Year awards, James Washington, the Blitnikoff, was it Roquan Smith, the Georgia linebacker, the Butkus Award, Bradley Chubb was the Defensive Player of the Year in the Nagurski, the Mackey Award, top tight end Mark Andrews, Scott Frost, who we talked about as Coach of the Year. Ed Oliver won the Outland Trophy, which I know aggravates you because it was he's the defensive tackle from Houston, who is a stud
player.
Stud. There's Quentin Nelson, who you believe, and a lot of others. People say, "Oh, you went to Notre Dame, so that's why I think of it." But a lot of others think Quentin Nelson is the best offensive lineman coming into this draft. He's a left guard for Notre Dame, and then Orlando Brown, who was the left tackle for Oklahoma.
I just look at that and say, and this is no disrespect to Ed Oliver, who's a great player.
Time out. Whenever you start something by saying no disrespect, disrespect follows. But go ahead. I mean, that's just the way it goes.
I had so many people in my mentions using his future draft status as justification for this. This is a guy who plays for a group of 5 school, so is not playing the Power 5 schedule and is playing grossly out of position. That's not his fault. He's doing what his team asks.
Right.
But playing him at a 3-4 nose actually seems criminal. What a waste of that talent to have him sitting there in that spot and just eating up triple teams for you. I get it benefits the group, but it really seems like you're putting a lamp under a bushel basket or whatever that saying is.
Light under a bushel?
Yeah, something like that.
You're bent about this.
I was really in my feelings on this one. I work on the Joe Moore Award. I watch a lot of the best offensive line in college football. I watch a lot of offensive line tape over the years and see a lot of this stuff. You'll be hard pressed to see someone perform as well as Quentin Nelson did, but him and Mike McGlinchey, both Walter Camp first-team All-Americans, on the same side of that Notre Dame offensive line. And in all seriousness, Ed Oliver's a hell of a player. He's a ton of fun to watch, and only a sophomore. I mean, it's disgusting.
If he was draft eligible this year, he might be a top.
He's a stud because he'll get to move to a 3 technique
Oh.
in the NFL, and he's gonna really, really do well.
I think the first 5-star recruit in the history of that school.
Yeah, right.
University
Yeah,
of
they had
Houston.
2 in that same recruiting class, I believe.
By the way, we put this up. I put this up on a Twitter poll at Wingos, and we'll probably retweet it at Golic and Wingo because of Baker Mayfield and the Browns. What's more likely to happen this weekend?
No.
Baker Mayfield doesn't win the Heisman, or the Browns win multiple games down the stretch? Because both seem pretty long odds.
And the Browns,
Wow.
by the way, play Green Bay, Baltimore, Chicago, and Pittsburgh. And you said multiple games, so
Multiple
that's
games.
more than one.
Got to be
in my
more than
definition.
one.
Yeah.
Got to be more than one. Because when we started, could they run the table? And was like, well, that's not possible.
No, come on.
maybe we'll give them one, but to make it maybe a little more difficult, they got to
Give
win
'em 2,
two.
yeah.
By the way, the third option, as always, is Battlestar Galactica on that poll. All right, we continue with
Off the top.
NBA news. The Nets have acquired Jahlil Okafor in a trade with the 76ers. Brooklyn also landed Nick Stauskas and a 2019 second-rounder.
Well, Okafor wanted out of there. I mean, listen, Embiid, what he's doing is ridiculous. He is so much fun to watch. Ben Simmons is, again, ridiculous for a 6'10 guard and what he's doing. He had his 3rd triple-double of the season last night in their loss to Lakers. So Okafor was kind of, who was obviously a high draft pick a couple of years ago, is just odd man out. He knew it's only played in a couple of games this year, and he wanted out. And now he gets out. He goes to the Nets, so we'll see what goes on there. What he can do, but he's a guy who obviously knows his ability is way more than what he's being able to show in Philadelphia and wants a fresh start somewhere and is going to get it. But, boy, the team he's leaving, I really love what the 76ers are doing. Okafor gone from there.
It's amazing that we can sit here and talk about the Browns and can't just look and see exactly what the future holds for them in the 76ers. The Browns will probably win 6 games next year, and we'll all look up and we'll say, oh, yeah, this is exactly what we saw coming because he got Sam Hinkie.
Wait,
Sam,
did you just say the Browns will win 6 games next year?
Sashi Brown is going to end up looking like Sam Hinkie in all this. We'll probably end up talking about them like the 76ers.
Trust this process?
Trust the process.
Brett, our fine researcher, when was the last time the Browns won 6 games? That feels like
That's
it was
just horrific.
an eon ago.
That may take him a long time to find out because he has to go back in time for so long.
That is extremely optimistic.
Prediction sure to go wrong, baby.
That is. I mean, I like it. If you're a Cleveland fan, heck yeah, but that is extremely optimistic. All right, we finish up
Off the top.
with more NBA and more 76ers. It was the Lakers surprised the 76ers in Philly on Brandon Ingram's last-second three-pointer.
Yeah, that was what a game last night. This is a very entertaining game going back and forth. Embiid, again, a monster with 33 points in this one, 7 rebounds, 6 assists. He was a monster in this. Ben Simmons, as I said, had his 3rd triple-double of the year. But it was Ingram who hit this. Lonzo Ball drove the lane as time was running down. Everybody collapsed on him. You looked at, and everybody does their percentages.
Right.
The percentage was he had a 44% chance as he was driving the baseline for that final shot, and it was a tie game, so they just needed 2 to hit that shot and get the win. But he kicked it back out because everybody collapsed on it. He kicked it out to Ingram, who was wide open for a 3, but the percentage of him making that was 33% as opposed to the 44% if Lonzo took the shorter shot. Bottom line is, he made it and they won. I mean, so you sit there and throw out all those numbers. Lonzo is obviously not a great scorer at this point by any stretch. Certainly great at vision and seeing the court, and he gave his guy a absolutely wide open shot. Ingram knocked it down.
You think he'll go overseas and hone those scoring skills with his brothers?
Oh boy.
There
Check that out.
Huh? You went there.
I mean, listen, it's out there. It's in the news. By the way, I know you guys were begging for a research team. Me and my crack research team of Google over here figured out the Browns won 7 games in 2014.
There you go. Congratulations.
Wow, good job out of you.
Well done.
Brett, you're fired.
Yeah, I was about to
Listen,
say,
that
no
quick.
need.
I
It's been a good run, Brett.
Yeah. Happens.
We'll
that way.
miss you.
Nicely done.
I won't, but
nicely
they
done
will.
on your part.
What was the iron in Happy Gilmore? 9. What did you say? 9 iron?
9
Well,
iron.
you're fired.
Yeah. We'll move on. And that was off the top on Golic and Wingo. But, what happened on Thursday night really makes the NFC South a very interesting division right now because that was the first of 2 games over the next few weeks that the Falcons and Saints are going to pair up. And right now, the division is Carolina and New Orleans at 9-4
Right.
despite the loss. Carolina at 8-4 because obviously they play coming up this Sunday and they've got a very tough game against Minnesota. Then you have Atlanta at 8-5. Now, despite all of that, because of division play and how these things will play out with tiebreakers, if Atlanta wins out because they play New Orleans again, despite the fact that they're in third place in that division right now, they would actually win the division.
Yeah, they would. They play Carolina again as well. The last game, December 31st, they're 0-1 against Carolina. They're 1-0 against New Orleans. New Orleans has already swept Carolina, and now they're 0-1 against Atlanta. So that game again in 2 weeks, and then if Atlanta can win that, the game against Carolina at the end of the year, they put themselves in a nice position, no doubt about it. New Orleans obviously still controls it all. Take care of their business, get this win over Atlanta in a couple of weeks, and they can be right where they want to be.
Yep. And listen, it's really going to be it might be the most fascinating division in football. And our NFL analyst and a guy I have on NFL Live all the time, Teddy Bruschi, says this one's the one to watch going down the stretch of the season.
Yeah, welcome back to the game, Atlanta. Here you are. You're back because now that entire division between you, Carolina, and New Orleans, you guys are going to pound each other out for the next few weeks, and the toughest man standing is going to be there. And there'll be possibly two of them in the playoffs, probably two of them in the playoffs. But this was very good, very huge, just a huge win for Atlanta to get because that defense making the play to win it. I mean, you won with your quarterback playing poorly.
Yeah.
Throwing 3 interceptions like that, making bad decisions, but you ran the ball. You played defense. It's December football. Here we come. You got to be feeling positive about what you did tonight.
You do, although it still is a concern because what is Atlanta's signature supposed to be? It's supposed to be that high-flying offense, right? 3 games ago, we had Julio Jones go for 259 yards. They were moving up and down the field. Then the last 2 weeks, they only got 9 points against Minnesota, and Minnesota has a very good defense. And last night, they sort of squeaked by with Matt Ryan throwing 3 interceptions. It's really been the defense over the last 2 games that has kept them in it. And if Atlanta is going to be what we think they can be and what they should have been last year if they just run the ball more in Super Bowl 51,
well, right,
they have to find a more consistent output on offense.
But I think you saw it, like they did run the ball 37 times, 132 yards. They controlled the ball for over 34 and a half minutes. So I think both these teams actually, because of the two-headed monster. Now again, Kamara went out last night in concussion protocol, so we'll see when they can get. They have the 10 days now, so you hope he'll be ready to go by the next game. But, Mike, I think both these teams we talk about December ball and playoff ball. Both these teams are dome teams, but both these teams can run the ball. As I mentioned, New Orleans, 2nd in the league, Atlanta, 6th in the league, which can help you, obviously, outside a dome to control it. Now, having an undersized defense and a speed defense, maybe depending on where you play, can cost you if you're playing in some bad weather outside. But I think from an offensive side, both these teams can run the ball well and can control the clock when they need to.
I'm interested in, obviously, the Saints. Alvin Kamara is in the concussion protocol, so it's not like a long-term injury that he can't come back from.
Right.
But it's scary how different this offense looked without him, right? We had lauded them for how well they used both these backs. I don't know what it would look like, obviously, if you remove Mark Ingram, and he was questionable going into the other night with a toe and ended up having to shoulder the bulk of the load, and it didn't go very well. Now, they had offensive line. They were on their 3rd-string left guard by the end of last night. They've had plenty of injuries up front in a group that still survived despite that depth, but they saw the game plan change. That first drive with Alvin Kamara, they're getting the ball to him on screens, on the edges. They're taking advantage of this guy's skill set, and you lost all of that, and that can be jarring during the body of one game, but you wonder going forward between him and Marshawn Lattimore, who was sucking wind on the other sideline coming off an injury, this Saints team that's been defined by Drew Brees for so long is going to end up being carried. They're either going to win or lose down the stretch on the backs of 2 rookies.
Yeah, they are. Right. Lattimore and Kamara, really quickly, to the point about the running, they abandoned it. I mean, they were never out of this game.
Nope,
this was a close game.
Down the stretch.
And they only ran the ball 15 times. They saw they didn't have their two-headed monster, and Ingram, as you mentioned, had the toe, so they basically went away from it. Brees threw it 35 times, and they ran the ball just 15 times.
Yeah, to your point, though, Junior, about the running game, just how crazy things are in New Orleans right now. When they had that 47-10 win, I think it was, over Buffalo earlier this season, that was the 25th time in the Drew Brees, Sean Payton era that they had scored 40 or more points. That was the first time they did it without a single touchdown pass from Drew Brees.
Right.
I mean, they're learning to win now in a very different way. And it almost felt like their safety blanket, Kamara, when he was taken away from them, they reverted back to the choo-choo-choo, let's throw it all over the field.
Exactly. It was really strange to watch because it's not like, to your point, it's not like it's been a running game that's only survived because of the backs. This is one of the leaders in yards before contact and yards after contact. To your point, the cephalopod, Alvin Kamara, is a large part of the region.
He's a bag of jelly, man. You can't tackle the guy.
You can't tackle the running back with no bones. It's physically impossible.
That was the first big hit I've seen him take all year long. And it was a freak play. I mean, it had nothing to do with the game being on Thursday.
No,
let's be clear about that. We'll get into that a little later. Get into that a little later. But
fired up, big boy.
We're pull. It's like the lawnmower. You got to pull the chain to get it going, and once it goes, it's. He's gonna be mowing through some conspiracy theories.
Sharpen my blades.
Exactly right. You might be like the weed whacker. Just
that's
around.
true. String out,
Just take it down. Now, Matt Ryan was the MVP last year, but he did throw 3 INTs. So let's give our MVP moment to Mohamed Sanu, who caught 6 passes for 83 yards in the game tying in the fourth quarter. He also gave the ball to his son in the end zone. Or you could give it to the oldest man in the world, Matt Bryant, kicking a 52-yarder.
There you go.
But either one of those. We'll go with Mohamed Sanu. The MVP moment of the week, brought to you by Sport Clips. You watch sports, we cut hair. It's perfect. Sport Clips, it's good to be a guy.
Hey everyone, Mike Golick here. Support for Mike and Mike podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. With Rocket Mortgage, you can apply simply and understand fully so you can mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Mikes. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
Computer, execute 12.4p operation.
Optimizing algorithm. Running encryption packet alpha. Night. Oh, I don't feel so good.
What is it, computer?
Is it hot in here? It feels hot in here. I feel a little clammy. I should lie down or something.
A computer with a virus? Surprising. What's not surprising? How much you could save by switching to Geico.
Those oysters Rockefeller were a mistake.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
By the way, did you hear Steve Kerr's comments about staying in Detroit?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's not a fan of the hotel where they're staying.
He irked Jamel Hill a little bit. I saw her come after
Apparently,
him.
They're staying at the MGM Casino Hotel in downtown Detroit, and he was lamenting.
I stayed there.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's fine.
Listen, anything that has the word casino in it,
You're good with it?
Good.
Steve Kerr, not so good with it.
Yeah, it doesn't seem so.
He was lamenting the back days when they used to play in the Palace.
Yes.
And they'd be out at Auburn Hills in Birmingham, a very nice, quiet community.
Yeah, he was not happy.
Not a fan of being downtown at the casino at the hotel. And
maybe did he have? I don't know if he's a gambling man. Maybe he had a bad day in there.
I don't know.
I don't know.
He sort of went around that issue. Yeah. It was more like there's too many people. I can't take it. Really wanted to get home fast. So finished up the game tonight. And you get home. You sleep in your own bed. We'll see what happens. Hey, by the way, today is the final day for V Week. Please join ESPN and the V Foundation in their fight against cancer. Go to visit v.org/donate. All donations benefit the V Foundation for Cancer Research. And when we say that, the administration of the V Foundation is fully funded.
Yes, it is.
So that's fully endowed. That's taken care of. So every time you donate, every single penny goes directly into research and the fight against cancer and finding a cure for cancer. So there's no administrative cost
in
not everything that you donate.
We understand everybody has their cause and things they donate to, and if you have something else, listen, fine. You're helping who you feel you need to help if you can donate to this cause, and we really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So as we continue on Golic and Wingo here, it was a stunning, fast turn of events for the Cleveland Browns, who fired Sashi Brown Thursday morning, and by Thursday night they had their new GM in John Dorsey. And everybody, well, not everybody, but I think most people would agree that John Dorsey is an exceptional hire here, right? He has a track record. We've seen what he's done in Kansas City. And he's been out there for a while. And I think one of the reasons the Browns wanted to act so fast on this is that they knew the Giants were also going to be looking for a new GM with the firing of Jerry Reese last week. Or this week. I can't remember. It all runs together. I think it was this week.
It was this week, yeah.
It was this week.
I think it was this week.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Anyway, so they knew that they were going to be in a competitive market.
Right.
So they wanted to get this thing done and get it done quickly. However, there are some people that are concerned, including the members of the Fritz Pollard Alliance, that did the Browns stick to the Rooney Rule, which means you have to interview minority candidates as well. as just bringing in somebody that you want and hire them in.
And most people think that was for coaches.
No.
It's not for coaches.
No, it's for front office
people as well. So it's a rule that goes to the management side of it as well.
All right. So did that happen? Did the Browns mess it up? Well, here's our Browns reporter, Pat McManaman, addressing that topic.
Yeah, and they're also putting it out that they have satisfied the Rooney Rule, and nobody really knows how they did that, but I guess that will become clear over time. But it wasn't really common. I mean, the Browns' MO all along through all these changes, every time they do it, has been to wait till the season ends and then start then. They decided, and I would think the Giants situation had something to do with it, that they had to do it now to get their guy, and they certainly did that quickly. I will give them that. The questions are erased. We know that Hugh Jackson will be back in 2018, and the Browns can now concentrate on getting better.
So, we'll see what direction that goes. Again, they're not going to hire another vice president. That was Sashi Brown was. Right. Dorsey he's going to be the guy in charge. He's a guy that, to say old-fashioned and rely on scouting, I mean, that sounds ridiculous.
Call me crazy.
You still rely on scouting. That's obviously guys out there, bringing to him who they feel are the people that can fit the system that they want to run. But it's a fair question to ask to satisfy the rule. I mean, because of the firing and how quick the hiring was, to think and then to say you satisfied the rule. I mean, I think people are looking for a little more explanation on that. Were you interviewing people before you fired Sashi Brown to satisfy that rule? Did you interview others in what seemed like 3 minutes before you hired John Dorsey?
That doesn't feel like you're getting a full
Sashi
interview
Brown.
there.
So I don't know, but they should have to answer that, and they should have to show, whether it's to us or not, to the league, to the people that this rule is effective for, show them to say, hey, that we have satisfied this rule.
And again, they're having a press conference later on today, and I'm sure that question will come up. Look, there are a lot of things that you can point to about the Browns that actually could be positive. I believe they hit a home run with Myles Garrett last year, the first overall pick of the draft. When he's been healthy, he's been a monster on the field. Not so sure about Njoku and Jabril Peppers, the other two first-round picks they made. But they have an extra first-round pick this year. I think they have 2 extra second-round picks. They have 6 extra picks in total, and they have a ton of cap space. But let's be clear about one thing with the Browns going forward. They are going to draft a quarterback, and they're going to draft a quarterback high. And I know they took DeShone Kizer in the second round, and that may or may not work out. It hasn't. I mean, they haven't won a game with DeShone Kizer yet, but this has been a pattern for the Cleveland Browns, and I understand that you can't say all these other players would have worked in Cleveland because there are a bunch of different parameters, but the list of quarterbacks that they have chosen to draft as opposed to the ones they chose not to draft is astounding. And we can go back to when they came back in the league in 1999. The first overall pick was Tim Couch out of Kentucky. Donovan McNabb was second by the Eagles.
Right.
I think we can all say that would have been a better choice.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to 2000. They put Courtney Brown first overall. There were injuries there for the defensive end out of Penn State. I understand that. And yes, everybody passed on Tom Brady that year.
Yes, they did, yeah.
I get that. However, Tom Brady was the 199th pick. The last team to pick a quarterback before Tom Brady, the Browns. And they went with Spurgeon Wynn. So they could have gotten that one. Let's go to 2001. Gerard Warren was who the Browns picked. Drew Brees went 32nd in that draft. 2004. They drafted Kellen Winslow 6th overall. Mm-hmm. Ben Roethlisberger went 11th to the Pittsburgh Steelers. 2005, they took Braylon Edwards 3rd overall. Aaron Rodgers went 24th. 2011, they selected Phil Taylor. Andy Dalton, not exactly on the same level as Aaron Rodgers or Ben Roethlisberger, but a very competent quarterback, went in the second round that year. 2012, they went Richardson and Brandon Weeden. Okay? He was the 4th quarterback taken. The 6th quarterback that year was Russell Wilson, 75th overall to Seattle. And, of course, in recent memory, 2014, they went with Johnny Manziel. The next 3 quarterbacks off the board, Teddy Bridgewater, Derek Carr, and Jimmy Garoppolo. And then in 2016, they got rid of this 2nd overall pick because Sashi Brown's quote, and that's one of the reasons he's not there, was he was like, we don't think he's a franchise quarterback. Yep. Folks in Philadelphia would certainly disagree. And they went and picked Corey Coleman 15th overall. And that has not really worked out, the wide receiver. And then, of course, last year they traded down from 12, and they got out of that spot, and Deshaun Watson went there, and they took Jabril Peppers.
I think a question to ask, because everybody, I get to ask this all the time when I go on in Cleveland, is whose fault is it? And listen, it's been going on since a lot of these stats are from 99. And there, as we said, there have been different regimes,
Yes.
even ownership.
To be fair, Jimmy Haslam got there in 2012.
That's exactly right.
A lot of this is predated
There's been
him.
new ownership. There's been different regimes from coaches to GMs. It's all been different. So that makes it very difficult to just point the finger and say it's this person's fault. One thing you can look at, though, one I think predictor is, because we can sit here and talk about, and the latest view of that would be a guy like Jared Goff. It was with the Rams and the former coaching staff, and basically everybody wanted to throw him on the trash heap. He becomes, a year later, he's with Sean McVay, and between, I think, natural development and a new coaching staff, he's doing what he's doing right now. So you named all the quarterbacks, that they took, or other players that they took as well. So you start going to scouting department, who you scouting, who you bring in to the GM to say we're going to pick, and who you picking, who you're selecting. And then after you select them, how are they being developed there? And if they're not being developed well there and they end up going somewhere else, how do they do somewhere else?
Right.
So then you can say, well, they were a bust. Were they a bust there? Or did they go somewhere else and they become a really good player? And all the names that you mentioned, not a lot of those names, A, did well in Cleveland, or B, went anywhere else and did well.
Correct.
So and that's something we can look into more and more, because there was a lot of players. There was a lot of high picks that were busts in Cleveland, not just quarterbacks. And you point to the very few, like those of like a Joe Thomas, who were fantastic picks.
2007.
But many more of them were not. So when they weren't, then you say, well, it was just the coaching staff. Well, then if they left Cleveland and went somewhere else, the player, did they develop and play well somewhere else? And there's a lot of players to look at to see if that happened. But not a lot of those names ring a bell and said, oh boy, I remember when they moved on to whatever team and became a Pro Bowler. So a lot of it is who you pick, who you choose to pick, and then how they're developed or what kind of a player they were. But that's what's maddening, Trey, is you can't point to, well, it was obviously this regime, or it was that general manager, or it was that coach, because there's been so many of them. It almost blows my mind. It's almost like with the Raiders. The Raiders have had more than a few coaches over the last umpteen years, right? And every year they seem to lead in penalties. Every year. But it's different coaches, it's different people, players being picked, but every year. So you sit there and you want to say, well, if the coach, isn't coaching against it, he's coaching for it, or whatever that line. Well, there's been a ton of different coaches.
Yeah, if you're not preaching to do it, you're not telling them not to.
So that's what gets damning about this. It says, who do you blame in that situation? That's what it is in Cleveland. That's why a lot of people, the Cleveland fans, just think they're just snake bit. And which is you're not snake bit. There's no jinx against you. But man, it's really hard to pinpoint the problem when so many different people have had a chance to pick talent and so many different coaches have had a chance to develop talent, and none of them have really done it at any kind of good percentage.
And I'll tell you this, the Cleveland fans deserve better. I mean, they are that franchise has been over the history of the NFL one of the cornerstone franchises of the league, and they've put up with so much. And look, we'll get into this when John Dorsey is introduced today, but they've already basically said, Hugh Jackson's coming back for next year.
Right.
So you're already saddling a GM with a coach that he may or may not want, and I don't know how that's going to work.
No, that's exactly right. Most want to come in and do their own thing. One thing I think we know is they did what they should when they benched him a couple times. I thought it was wrong. They kept DeShone Kizer in there for the most part. If he wasn't to get benched or he got hurt and come out, he has come in there. He's thrown 345 passes. You're finding out about him. 6 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, to the point where I think everyone in Cleveland is going to agree they're going to try and fill that quarterback position yet again in Cleveland, where that just makes Cleveland fans go, here we go again.
Yeah. By the way, do you know the last Browns quarterback to win on a Sunday? Their only win was not on a Sunday last year. If you don't know, we'll let you know next. Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN2. We asked you before the break, the last Browns quarterback to win a game on a Sunday was Johnny Manziel.
Johnny Manziel. How about that? Someone just showed a picture of Johnny Manziel getting into it. Was it what kind of a car? I think it was a Rolls Royce.
All right.
I think it was a sweet ride, that's for sure.
Where did you see that photo?
I don't, it's on Twitter or something. Said Johnny's still riding around in style, I think was the headline of it or something like that.
Well, remember that Johnny came from big money.
Oh, yeah, without question.
Big oil money.
And he was a first rounder, even though he's in the 20s, it's still, you're making yourself some money.
But that was actually that was always one of the issues when Johnny came out was, did he want to be a football player? Did he want to be a football star?
Oh, it's exactly right. No doubt about it.
Because he had the money. He didn't need the money.
No, he did not.
So you had to love the game. You had to love the game to get that going.
And that's my a little bit of fear for, and it shouldn't be held against him, is the talk of Baker Mayfield.
Yes.
Is that everybody loves this guy. He's a great leader. He's out there. He's gotten in trouble for some of his wild gestures, and some people are making comparisons to like, oh, he's kind of like Johnny Manziel, and let's not make any comparisons off the field. I'm not doing that at all. But how he leads on the field, and he's shorter like that, but he's certainly a lot more stocky. It's an unfair thing to do to him, but people do it anyway.
And speaking of something that you think is unfair, and we'll get into that, and this is going to be straight talk, ladies and gentlemen. There were a rash of injuries for the Saints in the Thursday night game, including Alvin Kamara going out on the first series. And after the game, Drew Brees once again railed against the idea of playing Thursday night football games.
It's 100% a product of playing on Thursday night. Do you understand what guys' bodies go through, in a game, and then to have to turn around 4 days later and to play? I mean, look at the injury studies. They're off the charts. So is this smart as it pertains to guys' health and safety? No, absolutely not.
So, listen, we've had Drew on this show many a times. My son was in camp with them, snapped the ball to Drew more than a few times, and Drew's been around. Drew's walking into the Hall of Fame, but Drew's flat out wrong. He's flat out wrong. All right? We've talked about this Thursday night stuff for a long time now. There are no differences in injuries. That is a proven fact. That is a statistic that you can figure out. And this stat is the last 4 years? You were saying the last 4 years, there is no increase in injuries
on a Thursday
night. There is no, and so there's the safe side of it, and then there's people say, well, it's sloppy football. It's flat as far as difference in turnovers on a Thursday night as compared to Sunday, and there's slightly more penalties per game. Say total penalties per game on Thursday, there's 3 more on average than the total in a game on Sunday. So I get a little tired of this. I really do. Now, if it wants to change, and if it's going to change, so be it. But I just want to ask, again, I'll ask some questions out there, and we have more time for this, but it gets a little aggravating to me. I played on Thanksgiving 2 times, and I bring this up, and I don't know if people think it's a good point or not. Did anybody care when I played, or Reggie White played, or Randall Cunningham? Did anybody? I don't remember anybody saying, wow, I feel bad for those guys playing on a Thursday. It was, oh, man, I get to sit down, eat my bird, and watch 2 games. And now there's 3 games. So it was 4 teams. Now it's 6 teams. Nobody cared. Nobody brought up a word about, wow, they're playing on Sunday and now they're playing on Thursday. Oh, my God, how do they do that? Because every team is doing it once. So now instead of 4 or now 6 teams that had to do it on Thanksgiving, now it is every team. I understand that. So it grew there. But there was no concern for that. 0. And now all of a sudden there's concern. So you want to tell me, well, with the head injuries and things like that.
Things have changed,
things have changed, but I just gave you a stat.
Yeah.
There are no more injuries on Thursdays than on Sundays.
Look, there are 2 separate points you're making there, and you're right. The only thing that we can point to statistically on Thursday nights is that there are more penalties.
Right.
And you can say that's because of a lack of practice time and the game's a little sloppy. I get that. The injury thing, you're right. There is no discernible difference despite what Drew was saying. We've just looked up the information. But the difference is, I think we're aware of many more things now that we weren't aware when you were playing. There weren't the concussion lawsuits. The CTE were 3 letters that we never put together in terms of football back when you're playing. So we are more aware of those things now, and we're trying to figure out how that factors in to whether or not these games should be played on a Thursday night. You're right. Nobody cared. The question isn't whether or not nobody cared when you guys were doing it. The question, should we have cared? Did we have the information to make us know that we should have cared?
So is the information, is it just about head injuries? Because we had an ankle injury last night. We had a groin injury last night. We did have one head injury. We did have that.
Kamara head-to-head. But that could have been on any play. That could have been on any play.
That's exactly right. So I really, and I'm asking, I don't want to yell about this, but I really want to ask, you know what? Stats show that it's not any different.
Yeah, that was Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. Coming up, we'll keep talking football and this conversation and more with Field Yates. That's next on Golic and Wingo. Stay with us on a Friday.